You sit in front of the screen, charts flashing, candles rising and falling. Like waves in a storm, you're trying to calm with your bare hands. You breathe. You tell yourself this time, you'll stay disciplined, no impulsive trades, no fear, no hesitation. But as the next candle forms, your heart skips. And without knowing why, you click again. You thought discipline meant control. Control over your emotions. Control over your trades. Control over the market. But here's the truth. The market doesn't care how much control you think you have. In an unstructured environment, you must create your own rules, wrote Mark Douglas in The Disciplined Trader. Yet the more you try to control the market, the more it forces you to face yourself. That's the paradox, isn't it? You came to trading to feel powerful, but every time you try to dominate the market, it humbles you. Because control in trading is an illusion. The moment you believe you have it, it slips through your fingers like water. Think about it. When you grip water too tightly, what happens? It leaks through every small space between your fingers. The tighter the grip, the faster it escapes. The same happens in your mind. You fight fear, and fear fights back harder. You fight uncertainty, and uncertainty multiplies. You try to suppress emotion, and it roars louder. What if discipline was never about suppression? What if it was about understanding? Most traders confuse control with order. But control is external. Order is internal. Control says, make it stop. Order says, let it flow. Douglas once said in Trading in the Zone, you can't rely on the market to make you consistently successful, any more than you can rely on the outside world to make you consistently happy. True discipline isn't about controlling the chart. It's about controlling your state of mind while watching it. Be honest with yourself. When was the last time you felt truly calm while trading? Not numb, not detached, but calm, aware, and open. That moment when you stopped trying to win and started seeing clearly, that's the edge the best traders live in. Because in that space, you're no longer forcing the market to obey your will. You're aligning your mind with its flow. If you've ever forced discipline, you already lost it. But don't mistake this as failure. It's the first sign of awareness. Because the mind that sees its own struggle for control is the mind that's ready to find true discipline. So, if discipline isn't control, what is it? That's what we'll uncover next. You think discipline is something you do, a set of actions, a list of rules to obey. Wake up early, stick to your plan, follow your stop loss. But discipline isn't built in your actions. It's built in your relationship with uncertainty. Mark Douglas once wrote, discipline is the technique for refocusing your attention when faced with conflicting beliefs. That line changed everything for me, because I used to think discipline meant controlling myself, holding tighter, pushing harder, suppressing everything that didn't fit my plan. But every time I forced control, I also forced resistance, and resistance always breaks. You see, when you force discipline, you turn it into punishment, and punishment creates fear. Fear of failure. Fear of being wrong. Fear of not being good enough to follow your own rules. True discipline doesn't come from fear. It comes from trust. Trust in your process. Trust that doing the right thing now matters more than whether this trade wins or loses. That's what Douglas called consistency as a state of mind. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. Presence means you do what your plan says. Not because you're forcing yourself, but because you accept the uncertainty inside it. Think about the archer. When he draws the bow too tight, the arrow wobbles. When he holds it too loose, it drops. The art isn't in tension, it's in balance. That balance is discipline. Not the absence of emotion, but awareness within emotion. Every time you try to control your feelings, you create friction. But when you observe them, you create space. And in that space, you can choose. Not react, not fight, just act. The paradox of discipline is that it's not about forcing control, it's about allowing clarity. The mind that accepts uncertainty is the only mind free enough to stay consistent. That's why the best traders don't hold it together. They stay open. They let the market move through them without letting it move them. Stop trying to be disciplined. Start seeing what pulls you out of discipline. Because the moment you can see that, you're already halfway free. But what happens when you do everything right and still break your own rules? That's where most traders fall apart. And that's where we're heading next. You promise yourself this time will be different. You'll follow every rule. You'll stay calm. You'll control yourself. And for a while, you do. Until the chart moves against you just slightly. Your breath tightens. Your mouth hovers. And the voice inside starts whispering, "Move the stop. Just this once." You obey. Not because you planned to, but because in that moment, control became fear. And fear disguised itself as logic. You already know what happens next. The trade hit your stop anyway. You close the screen, silence. You followed your rules until emotion rewrote them. That's the cycle, isn't it? You try to force yourself to be disciplined, but the more you fight your emotions, the louder they fight back. The more energy you add to resisting pain, wrote Mark Douglas, the more that pain shapes your behavior. You can't outmuscle the mind. Every time you say, "I must not feel this," you're feeding the very thing you fear. I remember the trade that taught me this. It was a winning streak. 5 days straight. I felt unstoppable. So I decided to increase my size just a little. When it reversed, I didn't accept it. I forced the market to make sense. I moved stops, added more. By the end of the week, every profit was gone. Not because I lacked a system, but because I couldn't accept losing control. You see, forcing discipline doesn't make you stronger. It splits you in two. One part obeys the rules, the other part resists them. And that resistance drains your energy. Until you confuse fatigue with failure, you start to believe there's something wrong with you. But there isn't. You're not broken. You're just trapped between two versions of yourself, one that wants control and one that craves freedom. And trading exposes both. The market doesn't generate painful information. Douglas wrote in Trading in the Zone, "It's your interpretation that gives it meaning. The market is neutral, but your mind is not. You see danger where there's only data, threat where there's only movement. Because somewhere inside, you're still trying to win against uncertainty instead of flowing with it. That's why forcing backfires. You can't demand calm from chaos. You can only dissolve into it until you see clearly again. Discipline isn't about holding yourself together. It's about not falling apart when things move differently. When you stop fighting the feeling stops controlling you. So maybe discipline isn't something you build through control. Maybe it's something you uncover when you stop resisting yourself. If that's true, then what does it really mean to let go without losing focus? That's where the paradox begins to unfold. What if control isn't the goal? What if control is the trap? You've spent years trying to master discipline by tightening your grip. But what if mastery begins when you finally loosen it? Mark Douglas wrote, "Self-discipline is simply the technique to refocus your attention when faced with conflicting beliefs." He never said it was about force. He said it was about focus. When you try to dominate your impulses, you create conflict inside your mind. Two voices fighting for control. But when you observe those impulses without judgment, only one voice remains: awareness. That's the paradox. Discipline isn't a wall you build. It's the space you create between thought and reaction. I remember when I first understood this. After years of fighting my own emotions, I realized they weren't enemies. They were signals. Fear wasn't there to stop me. It was there to guide me, to remind me where I still didn't trust myself. The harder I pushed fear away, the louder it became. But when I finally let it speak, it lost its power. And that's when trading and life began to feel effortless again. Consistency is a state of mind, Douglas said. When you accept the risk, nothing the market does can threaten you. Acceptance isn't surrender. It's alignment. It's seeing reality without trying to bend it to your will. Think of a surfer. He doesn't command the wave. He studies its rhythm. He moves with it, never against it. His balance isn't control, it's cooperation. Your discipline works the same way. It's not about suppressing emotion, but surfing it with awareness. When you accept that anything can happen, you free yourself from needing to be right. And in that freedom, consistency appears, quietly, naturally, like breath returning after a long dive. The paradox is simple, but it changes everything. You gain control only when you stop trying to control. You find peace only when you stop running from chaos. You act with clarity. The moment you stop demanding certainty. That's what Douglas meant when he said, the best traders are in the zone. It isn't a mystical state. It's the absence of internal resistance. So ask yourself, are you still fighting to feel safe? Or are you ready to feel calm, even when nothing feels safe? Because once you accept uncertainty, you'll start to see that acceptance isn't weakness, it's true control. And that's where we go next, where acceptance stops being theory and becomes practice. You spent years trying to control the market, but the real test was never the market. It was your relationship with uncertainty. When you try to eliminate uncertainty, you create tension. When you embrace it, you create freedom. Mark Douglas once wrote, when you accept the risk, you won't perceive anything the market does as threatening. That's not a trading quote. It's a way of living. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up. It means opening your hands after years of clenching your fists. It means seeing that fear loses its power the moment you stop running from it. Think of a surfer again. He doesn't control the wave. He reads its rhythm. He adjusts moment by moment. If he fights the ocean, he falls. If he flows with it, he rides. That's acceptance. Not passive, but participatory. You're not surrendering control, you're transcending it. Because true control isn't in the chart, it's in the calm behind your decisions. Acceptance turns the chaos outside into clarity inside. It transforms I must win into I am okay, whatever happens. And from that calm, consistency begins. This is where most traders finally understand what Douglas meant by the zone. It's not magic, it's neutrality. A state where outcomes no longer define you. Where a losing trade doesn't shake your peace, and a winning trade doesn't inflate your ego. You stop being the hunter of certainty and become the witness of movement. I remember the first time I accepted that. A trade went against me. Fast. Every instinct screamed to react, to fix it. But I didn't move. I just watched. Not with fear, but with curiosity. And for the first time, I felt something new. Stillness. That stillness didn't come from control. It came from trust. Trust that my preparation was enough. Trust that risk was part of the plan. Trust that I could handle any outcome without losing myself. That's when trading stopped being a test and became a mirror. Every moment reflected not the market's chaos. To trade without fear, Douglas said, you must trust yourself to confront whatever the market shows. Acceptance isn't weakness. It's power without pressure. It's action without attachment. It's discipline without force. And that's the paradox you've been searching for. When you stop needing control, you finally have it. Because control isn't about changing the wave. It's about changing how you ride it. It's not about removing risk. It's about being at peace with it. And that peace, that stillness, inside chaos, is where the trader becomes free. So now you know. Acceptance doesn't end the journey. It begins it. But awareness alone isn't enough, because knowing the truth means nothing if you don't practice it. The next step isn't control. It's repetition. It's presence. It's learning to live this calm, one trade at a time. That's the next lesson. Not just understanding acceptance, but practicing it. Awareness without practice fades. You can understand everything and still repeat the same mistakes. Because knowledge is memory, but mastery is muscle. And like any muscle, calmness must be trained. Gently, consistently. Letting go isn't something you decide once. It's something you do every day, in small moments. When you feel the urge to control, when you want the chart to prove you right, when you sense the tension before a trade, That's when the practice begins. Mark Douglas wrote, "Each time you set out to change a belief, you'll gain a resource that enables you to do it again. Every time you catch yourself reacting and choose to pause instead, you rewire the pattern. You move from instinct to intention. So how do you let go without losing focus? You pause, you breathe, you observe, not to suppress emotion, but to understand it, not to erase fear, but to hear what it's telling you. Because fear, when accepted, turns into information, and information, seen clearly, becomes opportunity. When you feel the impulse, wait. Let the breath finish before the click. Let the heartbeat settle before the decision. That pause is your edge. It's the space between reaction and response. The market doesn't care if you wait, but your mind does. In that stillness, clarity returns. The market doesn't change, you do. And every time you practice this, you teach your mind something priceless. That calm is a choice, available even in chaos. Discipline, then, stops being control. It becomes rhythm. A natural cadence between you and the market, like breathing with the tide. When you practice letting go, you're not escaping responsibility. You're embracing it in a higher form. You're saying, I choose awareness over impulse, presence over prediction, and each repetition makes the next easier. Until one day, you don't have to try to be disciplined anymore. You simply are. That's when trading becomes quiet, not empty, but full of space. A space where the mind can finally rest. And when you no longer need to prove control, what remains is peace. You sit in front of the screen again. Same room, same chart, but everything feels different. The colors are the same, yet the pressure is gone. The market moves as it always has. Unpredictable, alive. But now you see it for what it is. A mirror, not an enemy. Mark Douglas once said, "The market didn't change, you did." And that's the moment it clicks. The freedom you've been chasing was never in the charts. It was in you. You've stopped fighting for certainty. You've stopped trying to prove control. And in that silence, you've found something far greater. Trust. You trust the process. You trust your edge. You trust your ability to lose without breaking and win without losing yourself. That's freedom. Not from risk, but within it. Your trading is a feedback mechanism, Douglas wrote. It shows how much you trust yourself in this moment. Now, every tick, every movement is just information, not a threat, not a test, just a reflection of how calm you are. This is what discipline really was about all along. Not holding yourself together through fear, but being so present that nothing needs to be forced. Consistency was never a result. It was a state of mind. One you built through acceptance. You're no longer the trader who needs to win to feel worthy. You're the observer who acts from clarity, not emotion. The market will always move, but you can be still. Because control was never the goal. Peace was. And when you stop needing success to prove your worth, you finally deserve it. If this message hits you harder than a losing trade, take a moment. Don't chase certainty. Build calm. This video isn't financial advice. It's emotional awareness.